I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Listeners, I have a guest who's been on before. I love her. She's been on a few times. Her name is Christina Veselak, and she has been a licensed psychotherapist for over 30 years, working in the field of addiction recovery and trauma. She became a certified nutritionist in 1993, and since then has specialized in identifying and addressing the nutritional and biochemical drivers of addictive and mental health disorders. She directs the Academy for Addiction and Mental Health Nutrition, an online school teaching mental health and nutrition professionals how to take their practices to the next level by integrating these powerful life-transforming tools into their practice. Christina, I am so happy to have you back on the show.
Well, Kristen, I'm delighted to be back on the show as well.
It's such perfect timing. We were just having a conversation because, listeners, there's always the conversation before I hit record, and usually there's one after I stop recording. But Christina has personally helped me with my nutrition needs. And I just had seen a meme because, no one actually reads books, really. That's not true. A lot fewer people read books. They read memes. And I saw one this morning that talked about, with COVID-19 going on, there's a lot of stuff being kicked up, our addiction issues with food, with drugs, alcohol, whatever. And we're going to talk a little bit about, what we can do to help deal with that during this very stressful time that everybody is in all over this planet.
Absolutely. We've sort of been thrown into this whirlwind of events and stresses. And we're really being called upon, Kristen, to pull from all of our resources and all of our skills in order to not just cope, but perhaps even find ways to thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you just kind of go through maybe a little bit of a checklist of what you've seen from your own practice, from your therapists that come to you to help with their practices, what you've seen therapists saying that their patients are going through, that they're going through, and then also your own patients? Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing
Sure.
have an uptick?
Well, one of the things that my students especially are really mentioning a lot, and I'm seeing in my own clients as well, is fatigue. Just this sense of, I'm tired. I mean, some of this is depression. Some of this is sort of what's known as hypoarousal. We were all at the beginning of this sort of excited is the wrong word, but really amped up because we were frightened, we were confused, we were insecure, we didn't know what was going on. And then we were all told to social distance and things were getting better, and we stopped social distancing as much, and now sort of all hell has broken loose. And people, Kristen, are tired. Many people wake up in the morning feeling lethargic. They don't have their normal bounce. They don't have their normal get up and go. perhaps they're feeling discouraged. I mean, we all have a variety of stressors
Right.
that we're facing in the middle of this, but a lot of people are finding they just don't have the get up and the go to address these things as well as they used to in the past.
Yeah, I was talking about this with actually Joe Fusaro, who edits my show and many shows on the network, and he also does Hysteria Radio on the network. And, he was saying, listen, come Thursday, I'm tired and I have to hang it up. And which is, of course, being the company that we are, I'm like, do go, 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 go. And I feel the same. I mean, I've taken, I still have people, and it's probably just the nature of how I've always been. And then an uptick in people needing me to work harder to help them sort of get through this time, and me having to go, no, I'm having a hard time too. And I'm sorry that I didn't answer your email, or that I canceled, sometimes even the last minute or whatever, because I just need to really pull in sometimes and take care of myself and take naps and don't, where obviously we can't, go out anywhere, but I'm just slower. I'm at a slower pace, even though I am walking legit. And it is the heat index where I live is 107. So the fact that I get up at 5 or 6 a.m. every single day and walk about 2.5 miles is amazing. That's amazing that I actually do that. But and that's helping me keep my energy up, to be honest, because the days where we miss for some reason, I really am low ebb that day. That exercise helps, even though you are tired and whatever, it really does help with your energy. But even with that, I'm just like, I can only do what I can do right now. And I feel good. Don't get me wrong. I feel really good. But I have to take so many breaks. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Well, that's what I am talking about. And as you were speaking, I was reflecting that the people in my business coaching group, because I'm now part of a business coaching group, which I love, everybody is saying that they just have to push a little harder. They're feeling a little less productive. They are having to be a little more gentle with themselves and less critical, because we all have more that we have to cope with, and that's a drain. So, Kristen, here's what's really happening here. The more stress we're under, the more we use up our neurotransmitters in great big gobs. Okay? So it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully.
Mm-hmm. So, and let me just chime in on that, because I really, listeners, I want you to hear that. And this is an issue for me too. For those of us that, whatever the reason, our nutrition isn't up to par, or we've had a lot of trauma, or whatever it is, or we have genetic markers that make our serotonin go right down the drain. I mean, there's a million, or not a million, but there are reasons why this happens. That means that during this time, it is even harder for us to have some get up and go.
Exactly. It's even harder, and we drain our brain's resources even more thoroughly than we do at other times. And so it's important to realize it's not I don't want to say moral weakness. It's not a personal weakness here. It's the reality of how our brain actually works. And when we are facing more stress, we require our brain to work harder. And it has to produce more neurotransmitters, because it's the neurotransmitters that are the chemicals that give us the get up and go, that allow us to cope with equanimity, that allow us to flow, that allow us to relax, that allow us to go to sleep and sleep deeply. And when these neurotransmitters get depleted, we have to step up to replace them even more quickly than we had been at times of less stress. Yeah. And there's some specific things that we can do, Kristen, to step up.
Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about this. So what I'm seeing, and I want to kind of pause before we get into that list, is people really struggling with just raking themselves over the coals. Like, where did it go? Why can't I, handle these things? What's happening? And the last thing we need to do during this time is add guilt, shame, shoulds onto ourselves.
Exactly, because it's not, quote, our fault. It's not us being weak. It's not something being wrong with us. It's that there is being an awful lot required of us right now. And that's normal and that's okay. And we feel it. But there are things we can do to make it easier on ourselves.
Well, let's talk about those things that we can do to make it easier. And I'm going to be taking notes because I know that I am down on some supplements that you have told me to take. And and this is part of the thing too, is people will tell me something. Like, I've got people, here working on my house, and they will tell me something. And the old me, or the younger me, even from pre-COVID, could remember that stuff. And during this time, it's like many things go in my ear and then they're gone. And it's not, it could be, I'm getting older, whatever, but it's at such a higher degree than what I am used to, that could be alarming. But I realize, you know what, I'm doing the best I can. I really am doing the best I can.
I believe it, Kristen. And so are all of us.
Yes.
But some things that make it easier, and the walking you're doing at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to see me up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but anyway, the walking you're doing and the exercising that we can all do in one way or the other is tremendously helpful. But so is what we put into our bodies, because our brain's chemicals, these neurotransmitters that mediate stress, that mediate mood, that allow us to step up and cope in all the myriad of ways we need to, are made out of food. They are made out of the protein we eat and in the presence of vitamins and minerals. So we need to make sure that we're getting enough protein and getting enough sources of these vitamins and minerals and a few other things that I'll mention in a moment. So let's start with protein. Protein breaks down into little things called amino acids, and amino acids, which you can actually buy over the counter from your local vitamin store or online, are what make our neurotransmitters. Very, very specific ones. So for instance, the neurotransmitter dopamine, which turns into norepinephrine, that gives us concentration, focus, helps with memory, helps with energy and get up and go. That's made out of the amino acid tyrosine, which comes from the animal protein that we eat. And veganism is another story, and I don't want to address that in this, but we can find ways to support vegans as well. But we do find that animal protein is the easiest way to keep our neurotransmitters nice and happy, because they contain large amounts of all of the amino acids that we need. And keeping blood sugar stable by eating these every 3 to 4 hours can be profoundly helpful. Now, I understand some people are doing intermittent fasting and the keto diet and some more specialized things, which work for some people, not for everybody. But for a lot of people, keeping blood sugar balanced by eating protein every 4 hours will prevent sugar cravings, will prevent energy drop, will prevent anxiety spikes from blood sugar dropping too quickly. And all of these things will help us cope better.
And, I sometimes, I know that just because you've told me this, and I've been, there's so many things, there's so many businesses that have really, changed the way they do business, obviously, changed the way we can get food, since we are, social distancing, don't go to the store as often. You can get things mailed to you, definitely check them out. But I get organic grass-fed, organically fed, grass-fed meats, and things like that. I get that delivered to my home. And sometimes all I have for breakfast is a piece of animal protein. And that is so sustainable for me in terms of my mood for the rest of the day.
Isn't it though?
Yeah.
Exactly. And what we've found, especially for those of you out there who are finding it more and more tempting to reach for the sugar, the donut, the bagel, who are spending your, time doing more baking, going for the sugary things, that it's easier to avoid those and avoid putting on that COVID-19 by eating protein every 3 to 4 hours to keep the sugar absolutely stable. Now, you can eat other things with your animal protein.
Right.
Vegetables, maybe your complex carbs, if you can tolerate them, your whole grains. But we really find that at least 15 to 20 grams of protein is so crucial. So to put this in perspective, Kristen, 2 eggs is 14 grams. One of those little tubs of plain Greek yogurt is 12 grams. Okay. So a little tub of plain yogurt, ideally without the sugar, but maybe just a little bit of fruit sweetened jam on it, or a little bit of unsweetened applesauce on it with a handful of walnuts or a handful of almonds, makes a great breakfast. It makes a great snack. It's just really stabilizing to the blood sugar and to the brain and to our functioning.
And the reality is, listen, I'm not a big anymore. I used to be, trust me, but I'm over it with the whole get up, do my hair, wear makeup, get dressed up. And that's not the world that we live in right now. So, it really is okay if you've put on some weight during this time. And nobody can see it anyway because you're at home. So it's okay. I'm so okay with my weight. I've never been this okay with my weight in my entire life. And I've definitely put on some weight during all of this for sure.
Isn't that lovely that we get away with some of these things now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And at the same time, sugar is not really good brain food. And so we really want to be focusing on the brain food. So I mentioned tyrosine, which gives us the get up and go for focus and drive and energy. But a lot of us are also experiencing panic, fear, anxiety, the what ifs, the obsessive worry, especially those whose lives have been really profoundly negatively impacted by losing your job, etc. My daughter, Kristen, actually had to move home a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I get it.
Because she was one of those economic casualties.
I wish I could get my son here, but he has a stable job, thank goodness. But as an example, this is he counted on. No surprise, he's a workaholic. I'm a recovering workaholic.
Me too.
Yeah, and he was used to all those overtime checks, and overtime went bye-bye with COVID. So he is really, really struggling. Now he has a stable job. He's had it for a very long time, but he was used to that extra income. And other good friends of mine, have lost their restaurant, have lost their gym.
Sure.
Friends and people on this network doing podcasts that are first responders. They're in the hospital, nurses, doctors, and so on. And they, it's, I don't need to go on and on, but it's
right.
Everyone is really, stressed and struggling. And so if you have to move back home or take on a roommate or do whatever it is that you need to do to get through this time, it is okay. This is the least judgment zone ever. And we are sharing this experience with the entire world.
We sure are. So I'm going to start with grief, because you mentioned that people losing their jobs, having to move, losing their homes, losing a way of life. This brings up grief It brings up longing. A lot of people are lonely because of the quarantines. And if we have issues with loneliness already, it just makes it so much more painful. So there is an amino acid that we use for this, Kristen, and it's called D-phenylalanine. Long name, short name is DPA. And you can buy it online or you can buy it over the counter mixed with another amino acid called DLPA. And that gives us both get up and go as well as soothing, because DPA allows the endorphins in our body and in our brain to stay active longer. And the endorphins are what give us comfort, soothing, the sense of increasing the sense of bonding. It decreases loneliness. It decreases the experience of emotional and physical pain.
So this is what I do when I talk to Christina or I listen to her on podcasts. I start filling my Amazon cart. So tell us all again, DLPA and also DPA.
DPA.
Okay.
You don't really want to take DLPA closer to bedtime because it can be energizing for some people.
Okay.
And that's just where the straight DPA comes from. But you can only buy it over the counter. I mean, you can't buy it over the counter, sorry. You can only buy it online, the DPA.
The DPA. And do you need to take both or just the DPA?
Nope. The DPA by itself is just fine.
Fine. Okay, great. Okay, keep on going. I'm making that list.
Okay. So that's for soothing, comfort, and help us cope with loneliness better. Now, if we have this obsessive worry and these obsessive what if thoughts, and we can't sleep, or we're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning with all this rumination going round and round and round in our brain, that is a sign that our serotonin system has gotten depleted. And so we have more worry, more anxiety, perhaps we're more irritable. And using either 5-HTP or L-tryptophan.
Yeah, I have my big bottle of 5-HTP.
There you go. Can turn off that worry within 20 minutes. What's so lovely about amino acids, Kristen, and why I just love them, is because they work within 20 minutes. And if they don't work within 20 minutes, if you don't have a really noticeable change, either you need a higher dose or perhaps you need to turn to a different one. But when they work, when they get into the brain and the brain makes neurotransmitters, new ones, really quickly within 20 minutes, we can turn off a craving and we can turn off a downward spiral or a panic attack within 20 minutes.
Or the sugar or the whatever, or not even instead of, just do this first, take one of these first. And let it sit for a minute and then see if, okay, well, I don't really need to go grab that box of Twinkies.
Well, exactly. Or the extra glass of wine.
Ah, yes. Okay. Now it looks like the DPA piece tends to be wrapped up in fish oil. Am I finding the right thing?
No, it gets confusing on there. DPA is D-phenylalanine.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
Okay, I'm actually going to spell that because it's a little tricky. PHENYLALANINE.
Aha, okay, good. If you heard me typing, it's because I am typing.
D-phenylalanine. DPA is actually a type of fish oil, also stands for a type of fish oil, and that's not what we're talking about here. So it can be confusing. So 5-HTP or tryptophan. Tryptophan is a little more sedating. Many people don't like to use it in the day because of that, and they'll use it before bed to help with sleep. 5-HTP can be a little more activating for some people. So some people don't like using that at bedtime. They both do the same thing. They both raise serotonin levels. Now, there's one caveat, Kristen, and that is if you are on an SSRI antidepressant, so not all antidepressants, but the specific selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor ones, Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro,
Exactly.
those guys, you need to be careful using the over-the-counter stuff. And that's where it would be good to talk to me or one of my trained coaches just for some guidance in what to do and what not to do if you're on an SSRI. But if you're not on one, it's perfectly okay.
Okay. And many listeners of this show are on one of those. So.
I know. Now, the other antidepressants, the other psych meds are fine. It's just that particular class you have to be careful with serotonin precursors.
And what is, can you give us why, what is it that it does, or what is it?
Because if you add, since we know that the 5-HTP or the tryptophan make more serotonin within 20 minutes, and your drug is already making a lot of serotonin more available to your brain, we actually can get too much serotonin, and that's called serotonin syndrome.
Right, yes, and I've read all about that. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Exactly. Now, it's not an enormous danger if you're just on one SSRI, but it can become a real danger if you're on a couple of them or if you're on migraine meds as well. So this is where it's better to just get some coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've received from you, which I so appreciate. So it's well worth it, listeners. And we're going to talk about how you can make that happen and when we close out the show. But keep on going, Christina. I am making my new list here.
And the final category is GABA. So GABA is our brain's calmer. Serotonin helps us with flow and mellowness, but GABA relaxes our muscles and sort of relaxes our whole being. And when our GABA is low, we can have panic, but we have very tight muscles. We have trouble sleeping because we can't physically relax.
Right. Tell me about gabapentin. I know that that's a prescription that you get, but what is the difference between GABA and gabapentin?
So gabapentin theoretically is a GABA analog, which means that the molecule looks like GABA, but it seems to work a little differently, and it is actually dependency creating.
Okay.
I have some clients who've had a very hard time coming off gabapentin. So it can be very useful for some people for nerve pain. It can be very useful for anxiety. But sometimes just bringing in the simple amino acid GABA will have a very calming effect as well. You want to start dosing it low, like 100 milligrams, and then building. If you take too much GABA, sometimes you can get anxious. Okay. So we start low and then we build to your own sweet spot.
Okay.
There are some really nice GABA formulas out there that I really like by different companies. And then I also love the amino acid L-theanine. Okay. Because theanine is a calmer. It supports both GABA and serotonin. Again, it works within 10 to 20 minutes. Can take it before bed, but it also supports dopamine. So it gives us a little bit of a calm alertness.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a little more complicated than this, but essentially it turns off adrenaline and it turns off glutamate. So all of these anxiety and agitation producing chemicals in our brain get dampened with theanine. Okay. So I take theanine before I meet with my accountant.
Right, exactly.
Right?
That makes
because I hate numbers and I am scared of the bottom line. And it's just, okay, I'm just going to take, now usually the dose is 100 milligrams for theanine. I take 200 milligrams before sitting down with my accountant.
Okay. Okay, that is good to know.
and it works beautifully. It's also really good for people with attention deficit disorder because some of us start spinning. And when we spin, it feels like everything's hitting our brain and we don't know where to start. And we start getting panicky and we go from this to that to the other. And then we freeze. You ever have that freeze response where it's just way too much? And then we procrastinate. We don't do what it is we're supposed to do because it just feels way too overwhelming. Theanine stops that spiral. It stops that to-do list from spinning around your head. The to-do list settles down and your brain can now address it one item at a time.
Ooh, and this is the L-theanine?
This is the L-theanine.
And how many milligrams?
Usually 100 works.
Okay, gotcha.
Sometimes people need more, but that's a good starting dose. And Kristen, it's really important to understand that children can use these same amino acids. We may want to start with a lower dose, sometimes even a fingertip, but children's brains work the same in this regard as our brains and sometimes need the same support.
And really right now, I mean, I know you're in Colorado, correct?
Well, I was in Colorado, but I moved to West Virginia in November.
Right. Okay. Well, right now, the East Coast and lower East Coast especially is going through a heat wave, and it is summer also. So talk about, all this other stuff is going on, and we have record-breaking high temperatures, and that'll suck the life out of you like nothing else.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I've been noticing that. I've been staying indoors with my air conditioner on.
Absolutely. I just literally, I have to get out, which it's great that having animals that you have to take care of. So horse, donkey, dogs, all this, and it is hot. And you know what? I have to top off their water every day because, they don't need to be drinking boiling water from sitting in the sun. But just that walk out to the water or to take your dog for a walk early in the morning or whatever is going to take more out of you than it otherwise would. So that's another, thing to think about in terms of your energy.
And that's where the tyrosine can be useful. I've been finding myself using a lot more tyrosine the last month or so than I had been for a very long time in my life, because tyrosine is for that get up and go.
And isn't tyrosine prevalent in Turkey?
That's the tryptophan.
That's the okay. See, shows you what I don't know.
Gotcha. They both start with T's.
Okay, yes, it's in the T's. That's where you have the after Thanksgiving dinner arm wrestling for the couch.
There you go.
Gotcha.
So all of these different aminos, and you can combine them in different ways, and different companies combine them in different ways, are all very useful for what ails you. But sometimes people just want some more understanding or some coaching through this. And Kristen, this is where my company, Garden Gate Counseling and Consulting, comes in. People can make appointments with me just for some mental health, nutrition coaching.
It's wonderful too. So yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, and then we're gonna get your website for listeners.
Okay. But then I also run a school teaching practitioners how to do the same sort of thing. And on my website is a list of coaches from all over the country, but actually all over the world as well, who have been trained by me in how to do this and certified. And so many of your listeners might want somebody who maybe they can meet with in person, but at least somebody in their own neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely. So website, again, I want to make sure that everybody knows exactly where to go, where they can set up and you do phone appointments, or you can have a webcam appointment that way. So where do they go? Okay,
so it's actually my name, so ChristinaVeselak.com.
So my saying Christina Veselak was incorrect.
Same spelling, so VESELAK.
Fantastic. Well,
so ChristinaVeselak.com. relapsepreventionservices.com, because my husband and I work with people in recovery to prevent relapse. Same website.
Well, fantastic. Everyone needs this information right now. I needed a refresher. So, Christina, I'm so glad that you reached out. I'm glad that you've turned this into also, a coaching business, to help other mental health practitioners. So, there's more of you available. There's more of you to go around.
Well, my administrator keeps saying, we want to make little Christinas.
Right.
Well, I don't know about that, but, and Kristen, that website is addictionnutritionacademy.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to get me up to date, get our listeners up to date, Christina. I absolutely appreciate it.
You are so welcome, and it's lovely chatting with you as always.
And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but how to pose it.
Good boy.